I am Danielle Cordell, 30 years old woman. I live in Santa Barbara and work in credit risk analysis. 6 months ago, I found out my sister stole my identity to take out a $530,000 loan. What happened next changed everything. The last summer before it all fell apart was unusually quiet. Arizona heat poured in through the windows like molasses, thick and slow. The fan over the kitchen table clicked in a lazy rhythm, keeping time with the soft drip of condensation from the sweet tea pitcher I kept refilling every hour. Back then, Kendra and I still spoke every other day. Not because we were close in the healthy way, but because routine has a way of dressing up as love when you're too tired to notice the difference. She had always been the spark in our family, impulsive, loud, constantly reinventing herself. Her hair had been 6 different colors before we both turned 25. Mine stayed the same, a deep, chestnut brown I pulled into a low bun every morning before work. That summer she was back to blonde, said it made her more bankable. I didn't ask what that meant, I never did. She called me one Friday around noon. I was working from home, spreadsheets open, voice notes queued, calendar full. She sounded breathless. "Danny, you remember that apartment I was eyeing downtown, the one near the water tower?" I hummed, already half distracted. "Well, I got approved," she burst out. "Can you believe it? It's perfect. Exposed brick, tall ceilings, and a dishwasher finally." I smiled. I was genuinely happy for her. At least I thought I was. "That's great, Ken. How'd you manage it? I thought they needed proof of income for 3 months and—" "I figured it out," she cut in, quick and breezy. "You worry too much." It was that line, "you worry too much," that used to shut me up every time. It was code for, don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. And I didn't, not then. Looking back, that conversation feels like a fault line, small, almost invisible until the quake hits and the cracks are everywhere. Later that evening, I met her at our favorite taco place off Jefferson and 6th. It had yellowed string lights and weathered picnic tables, and we always sat at the one in the far corner where we could watch the trains rumble past. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a sleeveless white dress. She looked expensive, confident in a way that made me feel like a background extra in my own life. She talked the whole meal about the apartment, a new consulting gig she was starting, how she might finally get into real estate. I asked questions, not deep ones, the kind that float on the surface of a conversation like dead leaves, and she gave me answers that sounded good enough. Then she offered to pay. She never offered to pay. I stared at the sleek black card she slid across the counter. It had my name on it. I blinked. "Is that my card?" She laughed, loud, dismissive. "Relax, Danny, it's just a backup one you left in my drawer when we lived together. I had it reactivated, you weren't using it." My throat tightened. "That's fraud." "It's dinner," she said, still smiling. "Besides, I figured you appreciate the points." I let it slide. Not because I thought it was okay, but because it was easier than fighting her in public. Easier than facing what that moment really meant. That night, I opened my laptop and checked my accounts. At first, everything looked normal. Then I noticed a transaction from a financial services firm I didn't recognize, another from a car dealership in a city I hadn't visited in over a year, and then a loan approval from a lender I'd never even contacted. My blood ran cold. There were emails in my inbox I hadn't written. Signatures I hadn't signed. Documents I didn't remember uploading. And her name was on none of them. I called her, heart-pounding, jaw clenched. She didn't answer. So I drove to her new apartment, the one she got approved for. And I stood there, outside the glass doors, watching through the reflection as she poured wine into 2 glasses. She was laughing with someone I didn't recognize. She looked happy, carefree, like someone who had nothing to lose. I knocked. She opened the door slowly, like she'd expected me. Her smile faded. "Danny," she said softly, like I was the one who owed her an explanation. "We need to talk." The rest of that night is a blur. Raised voices, tears, her saying things like, "You wouldn't understand and I needed help and I was going to pay it back." She swore it was only temporary. Swore she never meant to hurt me. Swore this was the last time. But I'd heard all those lines before. I left without hugging her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like her sister. I felt like her mark. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my apartment with every folder, every password-protected file, every email chain I could dig up. And I started making a timeline. Transactions, IP addresses, contact names, wire transfers. Piece by piece, I reconstructed what she'd done. How she'd rerouted mail to a PO box. How she'd impersonated me on 3 applications. How she'd stolen over $340,000 of my trust fund money left by our grandfather when we were both still in braces. I remember staring at the final number. $342,911.08. And feeling nothing. Just numbness. Like grief with its volume turned down. The next morning, I filed the report. Police, bank, legal counsel. I did what any rational person would do. But inside, I was breaking in places I didn't know existed. Because this wasn't just fraud. This was betrayal with my face on it. This was the person who once held my hand at our parents' divorce hearing. Rewriting my life like it was a script she had the right to steal. That summer ended with court dates and subpoenas. But for me, the real ending was that taco night. The moment I saw her swipe that card like it was nothing. The moment I realized she no longer saw me as family, just as inventory. And that was the last time I ever shared a meal with her. You'd think courtrooms would feel dramatic, the way they do in movies. Wood-paneled walls, stern judges, gasps from the audience, a moment where truth slices the air like lightning and everything changes. But the courtroom where I sat, knees clenched, heart rigid, was fluorescent and cold. The kind of place where justice doesn't feel like healing. Just paperwork. The kind of place where family doesn't feel like family. Just opposing counsel. Kendra sat 3 rows up, barely meeting my eyes. She wore a charcoal suit, hair neatly pulled back. She looked small, like someone playing adult for the first time. Her attorney, someone I'd never met, kept glancing at me like I was an obstacle, not a person. Mine sat beside me, calm and quiet. Her name was Teresa, a woman who'd seen this kind of case before. Not rare, she'd said. Family fraud is brutal but common, you're not alone. But I was alone. Because in that room, there were no parents to stand beside me. No mutual friends. No old neighbors to whisper, she's always been a handful. Just me. And the sister I had once shared a twin bed with during thunderstorms. The hearing was about restitution. We weren't arguing whether she did it, that had already been proven. Kendra had confessed during depositions, in a moment of desperation. What we were here for now was whether she would go to prison. Or just repay me. And if so, how much? And how long it would take? And whether she could serve probation in exchange for cooperating. I sat still as her lawyer tried to argue that she only done it out of emotional trauma and that no irreversible damage had been done. I wanted to scream. No irreversible damage. I had spent 3 months unraveling the mess she left behind. Banks froze my accounts, clients dropped me while I sorted things out. My apartment application for a new place downtown had been rejected due to a flagged credit history. That summer, I couldn't even buy a used car without a cosigner. She didn't just take money. She took my name, my ability to move, to breathe freely, to trust anything in my own name again. The judge asked if I wanted to speak. I stood slowly. Not out of courage, but because I'd promised myself I'd say this out loud at least once. I looked at Kendra. And I didn't speak to the court. I spoke to her. You didn't just steal numbers, I said, voice low but steady. You stole time, you stole trust, you took something I will never get back, not even with a full refund. She blinked, her lips parted slightly. I continued. You made me afraid to open my own mail, to answer unknown numbers. You made me look in the mirror and ask, what part of me wasn't enough for you to love without taking? I didn't cry. Not then. Because I knew if I started, I wouldn't stop. I don't want revenge, I added, but I do want boundaries and I want peace. And peace for me means knowing I'll never have to share a checking account or a holiday with you again. She lowered her head. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe she just didn't care anymore. The judge ruled partial probation, 6 months community service, and a 10-year repayment plan. She wouldn't serve time unless she defaulted again. It felt like a compromise that didn't compromise anything. Like closure that didn't close. Outside the courthouse, Teresa asked if I wanted to talk. I said no. I just stood there on the sidewalk staring at the sidewalk cracks. My shoes were scuffed, my blazer felt too tight. And I realized something I hadn't felt in a while. Wait. But this time not emotional. Physical. I was tired all the way to my bones. That night I took every photo of us together off the wall. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. There's a point where nostalgia turns into rot, where keeping someone's smile on your shelf feels like preserving the scene of a crime. I boxed them up, labeled the lid before, and tucked it into the hall closet I never open. A few days later, I got a call. It was from her new job. Apparently, she'd listed me as a reference. The woman on the other end said Kendra told them we'd recently reconnected and worked on a nonprofit together. I let silence stretch long enough to sting. Then I said we haven't spoken since court and she's never worked with me professionally. I'm sorry. The woman hung up quickly. I don't know if Kendra got the job. I didn't care anymore. Because something in me had shifted. The part of me that used to check on her silently, that used to drive by her new place and wonder if she was okay, that part had finally shut down. And in its place, a new kind of emptiness. Not cruel, not hollow. Just still. Like a wound that had stopped bleeding and started to scab. 1 week later, I changed my phone number. Not because she tried to reach me, but because I needed one thing in my life that didn't come with her fingerprints on it. It was the first number I'd ever had that she didn't know. And that somehow felt like my first real step forward. I used to flinch when I heard her name. Even when it wasn't her. Someone at a cafe would call out, "Kendra, your order's ready." And my hand would tighten around my cup like I'd just been burned. That's the strange thing about betrayal, it lingers in sounds. In syllables. In echoes that shouldn't belong to one person, but suddenly do. After court, I didn't hear from her. No apology. No letter. Not even a request for mercy. It was like she dissolved into the fog she created. Which made it easier. At least at first. No more messages from mutual friends asking me to talk things through. No more awkward holiday invites from distant cousins pretending not to know. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I started sorting. I started with my name. See, Kendra and I had shared everything growing up, including initials. She was Kendra Voss. I was Daniela Voss. And when we started our business together, our clients used to call us the Voss sisters, like we were some brand. It was cute. Until it was. Until my bank statements started reflecting charges I didn't make. Until I sat in a bank manager's office and heard, "We'll need to verify this with the other account holder, Ms. Kendra Voss." Until my own last name made people suspicious of me. I remember staring at that name, Voss, on my lease agreement. And suddenly, I didn't want it anymore. Not because it wasn't mine, but because she'd worn it like a costume and stripped it of its meaning. So I filed the paperwork. Legally, it's a process. Court forms, notarized documents, a small hearing. I chose my mother's maiden name. Daniela Reyes. Still May. Still strong. But no longer living under a shadow I didn't cast. When the judge approved the change, I walked out of the clerk's office and sat on the courthouse steps. Not to cry, but to breathe. Because for the first time in over a year, I felt unnamed by her. A few days later, I told my dad. We hadn't talked much since the court case. He was embarrassed. Quiet. Always kind to me but distant, like he was nursing his own private guilt. When I called to tell him, he said, "That's gonna take me a while to get used to." I said it already took me too long. He went quiet again, then added softly, "You know she used to sign my birthday cards for both of you, even when she didn't call." I said, "That sounds right." He asked, "You ever think about forgiving her?" I said, "I don't think forgiveness is a gift I owe someone who hasn't asked for it." He said nothing after that. And I didn't push. Because some fathers mourn their daughters differently, especially when one breaks the other in half. Changing my name wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming silence. I started using it on emails, business cards, my new website. Clients didn't notice, but I did. Every time I saw Daniela Reyes in print, it reminded me. I survived. Not in spite of her, but in defiance of what she tried to take. And slowly, that name became more than paperwork. It became permission. To say no. To stop explaining myself. To stop justifying why I didn't invite her to family weddings. Or why I skipped the reunion where she might appear. Or why I was ready to reconnect. I didn't owe readiness. I owed myself peace. One night I ran into an old client, someone who had worked with the Voss sisters years ago. He barely recognized me. Said, "You've changed." I smiled. Not bitter, just full. I said I had too. He said, "I hope she's doing okay." I said, "She's doing what she always does, disappearing into someone else." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. Because the way I stood, steady, spine-tall, clear-eyed, said everything. I kept a photo of us. Just one. From when we were kids, maybe 7 and 9. Sitting in a blow-up pool in our backyard, popsicle juice on our cheeks, sun in our eyes. Because not all of her was a lie. And not all of our childhood was broken. But I kept that photo in a drawer, not a frame. Memories don't deserve altars when they've become altars of pain. I remember one moment in the quiet of that year, standing at my window during a thunderstorm. The city lights blurred with rain, and I thought, how many names does a person have to shed before they feel brand new? And the answer wasn't in the shedding. It was in the choosing. There's a strange, full-circle feeling that hits you the first time someone who betrayed you walks into your world. And has to serve you. I didn't plan it that way. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even irony. It was just life being unexpectedly poetic. It had been almost a year since court. Since I changed my name. Since I boxed up all the memories I couldn't carry anymore. My business, the one Kendra and I had once started together, had taken a new shape. I'd rebranded. Renamed. Rebuilt. Clients trickled in, then flooded. By that spring, I'd opened a new location downtown, a hybrid cafe and catering service, a dream I'd had since culinary school, long before spreadsheets and stolen checks. I called it Second Table. Because everyone deserves one good seat after the mess of the first. Hearing was chaos in the best way. We needed staff. People with grit and grace and hustle. Baristas. Line cooks. Delivery runners. And one morning, while flipping through printed applications, I stopped. There in black ink. Kendra Holland. New last name. But no mistake. Same neat cursive. Same telltale email address. I stared at it for a full minute. She hadn't recognized my company name. Why would she? I'd changed everything, logos, location, even my business license. And yet here she was. Applying to me. I didn't call her. I didn't email. I just filed the application away and said nothing. Until the day she walked in for an open interview. She wore black jeans and a white button-up. Hair pulled back. Face thinner than I remembered. She didn't recognize me right away. I was behind the counter, prepping sandwich trays for a mid-morning event. One of my managers was doing intake, but paused and looked at me when he read her name aloud. Kendra Holland. I froze, then wiped my hands on a towel, and stepped out. The moment our eyes met, everything stopped. Not for her. For me. Because in that second, I saw the girl she'd been before the theft. The one who shared grilled cheese with me on the porch. The one who used to sing into her hairbrush and make me laugh until I cried. And I also saw the woman who forged my name. The woman who sat silent in court while I begged for closure. Both lived behind those eyes. She whispered, "Danny." I said nothing. I just nodded toward the back room and said, "Let's talk." She followed. We sat across from each other in the break room. The humming of the fridge filled the space between our silence. She looked around, confused. "This is yours." I nodded. "I didn't recognize the name," she said softly. "You wouldn't," I replied. Then more silence. Until she whispered, "You changed your name." "Yes." "To what?" I didn't answer. Because it wasn't hers to ask anymore. She started to speak, then stopped. Then tried again. "I didn't know it was you," she said. "If I had. You wouldn't have come," I finished. She nodded, ashamed. But not surprised. Then she looked at me, eyes trembling. "I'm trying to fix things," she said. "I've been in recovery, I've paid back almost half, I'm not proud of who I was." "Who you were," I said, "or who you are when you think no one's watching." She flinched. I didn't mean to cut deep. But some wounds don't know how to heal politely. I stood up. She did too. "I don't know why you came here," I said, "but this kitchen, this place, it's built on honesty, clean hands, clean names, real work." "I can do real work," she said quickly. "I just need a chance." I stared at her for a long moment. Then said, "Then you'll start at the bottom. Dish pit, night shift, no access to finances, no contact with clients." She blinked, stunned. "You're hearing me." "I'm giving you work," I said, "not forgiveness." That night, she showed up. No makeup. Apron tight. Hair tucked up. She didn't speak to anyone more than she had to. Just scrubbed plates. And wiped counters. And took out trash. Like it was her only chance to hold onto something solid. For 3 weeks, she didn't miss a shift. Didn't ask for extra breaks. Didn't talk back. Didn't flinch when people called me Ms. Reyes. It wasn't grace. It was survival. But even that was new for her. One day, I caught her staring at a photo on the wall, the one of our kitchen crew during opening week. She turned to me and said, "You look lighter now." I didn't answer. Because I wasn't looking for compliments. I was looking for proof. And every night she showed up. Every night she scrubbed dishes until her fingers wrinkled. That was proof. Not of love. Not of redemption. But of a truth I never thought I'd feel again. She couldn't take anything from me anymore. Because I didn't need her to give it back. I'd built it all over again without her. And now, she worked in my kitchen. The one place she never believed I could build without her. The first time we were alone again, really alone, was after a rainstorm. She had stayed late to finish scrubbing the prep fridge. I was checking inventory. It was nearly 11. The cafe was quiet, warm, flickering with the hum of closing time stillness. Most nights she'd slip out quietly when her shift ended. But that night she lingered. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was something else neither of us could know. I stood at the window with the clipboard, watching the city lights smear across the wet sidewalk like waterfalls. Behind me, I heard her ask softly, "Do you ever miss me?" I didn't turn around. Miss what? Us before everything. I set the clipboard down. Still didn't faze her. I miss who I thought you were. That's fair, she whispered. She walked over to the counter and sat on a stool. Not like she owned the space. More like a kid waiting outside a principal's office. I thought you would slam the door in my face, she said. You could have. I didn't answer. Because part of me had wanted to. And another part of me knew. Slamming the door might have made her smaller. But it wouldn't have made me whole. She folded her hands on the counter, eyes down. You know what broke me the most? She asked. I stayed quiet. She said, you didn't scream at me in court, you didn't cry, you just looked at me like I was a stranger. I turned now. Met her eyes. That's because you were. She nodded slowly, the weight of truth settling across her shoulders. I deserve that, she said. And for the first time, she didn't say it like a line. She said it like a confession. I sat down across from her. The hum of the espresso machine faded. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a bus sighed at the curb. She looked tired. Older. And maybe honest. I used to think I was smarter than everyone, she admitted. Even when I stole from you, I told myself you had enough you wouldn't notice. I noticed. I know. And it wasn't just money, I said. It was trust, it was us. You didn't just steal a number, you stole my name, my safety, my story. She covered her mouth, shaking. Not weeping. Just crumbling like someone realizing they can't outrun the mirror anymore. I didn't even know how to stop, she whispered. I'd tell myself just one more transfer, then I'll pay it back, but it never stopped, and by the time it did, I was already gone. I nodded slowly. Because that was the part I finally understood. She hadn't walked away from me. She had drowned. And the version of her I loved had been pulled under with her. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I wouldn't even know what to do with it. Good, I said, because I'm not offering it. She looked up, surprised. But I'm also not angry anymore, I added. Not because of you, but because of me. I stood up, walked to the dish rack, poured her a glass of water and set it in front of her. Every night you show up, clock in, wash dishes, that's your apology. Quiet, unremarkable, but real. She blinked, took the glass, held it like it meant something. Maybe it did. Do you think we'll ever be sisters again? She asked quietly. I thought for a long time. Then shook my head. I think we already are, I said. Just not the kind we used to be. She smiled through a tear. It wasn't a movie ending. There was no music swell. No warm hug. No neat ribbon tying it all up. Just two women sitting in a closed cafe. Both carrying a story. Both trying to clean what couldn't be erased. Both choosing in small ways to keep showing up. That night when she left, she turned at the door and said, "Thank you for not hatting me." I replied, "Thank yourself for earning that." Then locked up behind her. And for the first time in years, I didn't check the register twice. The day I handed her the spare keys was the day I stopped expecting her to fail. It wasn't some grand ceremony. No dramatic music, no slow clap of redemption. It was Tuesday. Overcast. Delivery truck late. And we were short-staffed. She was tying her apron when I said, "You'll need to open tomorrow. I've got a supplier meeting in Brooklyn at 6 a.m. She froze. Not out of fear. Out of shock. You want me to open? I shrugged, flipping the clipboard to the next page. You've been here 6 months, never missed a shift, you already know the alarms. She stood still, her eyes filling. I won't mess it up, she whispered. I looked up, met her gaze, held it. I know. There's something strange about trust when it starts growing back. It doesn't shout. It doesn't knock. It tiptoes in when you're too tired to defend the door. And suddenly it's sitting beside you, drinking coffee, asking how your day was. That next morning I arrived late on purpose. I wanted to see if she could do it. Not because I wanted her to fall, but because I finally believed she wouldn't. When I pushed open the front door, the cafe was already humming. Lights on, muffins baking, chalkboard updated. Kendra stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, correcting the order of a flustered barista with calm precision. She didn't notice me at first, but the second she did, her face flickered, not with guilt, but with pride. I fixed the espresso machine, she said, brushing her hands on her apron. It was the water line again. I nodded, smiling. Good. And we're down to our last 3 gallons of oat milk. I'll grab more after lunch. She hesitated, then added softly, I already called it in, should be here by 10. I raised my eyebrows. She smiled just barely and went back to work. That day was the first day I saw her not as the girl who stole my future, but as the woman who was helping build it again. One line cook called out. One client canceled last minute. A birthday cake order got dropped. She handled all of it. Quietly, quickly, cleanly. Later that evening, I found her sitting out back by the crates, sipping tea. She looked up as I stepped outside. You good? I asked. She nodded, then pulled something from her pocket and held it out. The keys. I'll give them back, she said. You don't have to trust me this much. I didn't take them. Instead, I sat down beside her. You don't give trust back, I said. You carry it until someone stronger than you needs to believe in something again. She blinked, holding the keys like they were glass, then tucked them into her apron, and said nothing. Weeks passed. The cafe flourished. A local blog did a write-up on us, Second Table, where second chances are baked in. I didn't write that headline, but I felt it. Because now, when I saw Kendra behind the counter, I didn't see betrayal anymore. I saw sweat, work, earned weight behind her steps. One night, a customer left a note on their receipt. The woman who served me had the kindest eyes, thank you. It was her table. I showed it to her after close. She read it 3 times. Then said, voice cracking, I never thought anyone would say something like that about me again. I smiled. People say it when it's true. Later that night, she asked if she could come in early the next morning to test a new muffin recipe. Of course, I said. Then paused. Just don't burn the place down. She grinned. No promises. And when I locked up and walked to my car, I realized something that stopped me cold. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of her. Not of loss. Not of opening my door to someone who once broke it down. Because she wasn't standing outside the door anymore. She was on the other side, helping keep it open. It was just a scrap of paper. Crinkled, coffee-stained, torn at the edge. I only found it because I was restocking the sugar bin behind the register, and her apron must have slipped off the hook above. The note floated out from the front pocket and landed by my foot. At first, I thought it was a receipt. Until I saw my name. Not in accusation. Not in anger. Just 4 words scribbled in blue pen. Don't disappoint her again. I stood there motionless, holding the paper like it might disintegrate. On the other side, she'd written a date, 6 months earlier, the week she'd started. The ink was faded but clear. The rest of the message, scrawled beneath it, was shakier. If she gives you one shot, just one, you don't waste it, not again. You earn her trust with your silence, with your sweat. You lose the right to explain yourself. You owe her results, not reasons. I swallowed hard, sat down on the milk crate nearby, and stared at the words until they blurred. She didn't know I saw it. I slipped it back in her apron quietly, the way you might tuck a note back into a diary someone accidentally left open. But after that, I watched her differently. Not with suspicion, with something closer to awe. Because I realized something I hadn't before. She wasn't working her way back into my life. She was fighting her way back into her own. That afternoon, we got slammed with a lunch rush. One of the high school volunteers dropped a tray of dishes. A customer spilled almond milk across the pastry display. The card reader froze. In the middle of it, I saw Kendra slide past chaos with a calm I didn't know she possessed 6 months ago. She cleaned the spill, reset the display, reassured the panicking teen, all in under 2 minutes. When the last customer left and the bell over the door finally stopped ringing, she exhaled and leaned back against the counter, laughing. It was the first time I'd heard her really laugh in years. Later that week, I asked her if she had time for a staff meeting Saturday. She hesitated. I was going to go visit Mom, she said softly. I haven't seen her in a long time. I nodded. You should. Would you want to come? The question hit me like an old photograph falling from a dusty shelf. I didn't answer right away. When Saturday came, we drove in silence, not tense, just careful. Like two people driving through the ashes of something once burned. Mom was older than I remembered. Smaller. Her hands trembled when she reached for me. But when she saw Kendra, her eyes flooded. She didn't say, "Where have you been?" She just whispered, "You came back." And that was enough. We sat in the garden. No big speeches. No recaps of the years lost. Just the sound of wind in dry leaves, and a mother holding both her daughter's hands like she might lose them again if she blinked too long. On the drive home, Kendra finally asked what I'd been thinking all week. Do you think she forgives me? I kept my eyes on the road. She doesn't need to, you forgave yourself. She looked at me, surprised. I'm still trying. That's what forgiveness is, I said, trying when you could have quit. That night, I stayed late to do the books. When I went to lock up, I noticed a fresh slip of paper pinned near the register. A new note, hers. I knew the handwriting. It read, Day 182. Still showing up. Still grateful. And under it, she'd written just one word. Home. The check came folded inside a plain white envelope. No card, no note, no flourish. Just a name typed in the top left corner, Kendra L. Hawthorne, and a cashier's seal from the credit union 2 blocks over. It was $80,000. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. Not because of the amount, but because of what it meant. She hadn't said a word. She'd just returned what she could. It wasn't even close to the full damage, we both knew that. When the lawyers tallied everything she'd taken, between the forged withdrawals, the silent debt stacking, and the phantom vendor invoices, it was over $720,000. But this wasn't about numbers. It was the first time she didn't ask to be forgiven. She just did something worthy of it. When I found her in the kitchen, prepping pastry trays before dawn, she didn't look up when I walked in. I got the envelope, I said. She nodded, still slicing butter into flour. I told you I'd fix it. You didn't have to. She finally met my eyes. No, I did, you just didn't expect me to. That moment landed heavier than anything she'd ever confessed. Because deep down I hadn't expected this. I'd made peace with never seeing a dime again. I didn't open the cafe to balance a ledger. I opened it to balance myself. But now, seeing her there, flour on her arms, eyes steady, cheeks pink from the oven, I realized what she was really giving back. My faith in people. My belief that people could fall, fail, and still choose to be better, not out of obligation, but out of love. I didn't deposit the check right away. I kept it in my coat pocket all morning, running my thumb along the edges like it was a worry stone. By the afternoon, I'd made my decision. When our shift ended, I walked her outside. The air was cold but soft, the sky brushed with early spring violet. I handed her the envelope. She blinked. What? I didn't cash it. Her face stiffened. You don't trust it? No, I said, I trust you, that's why I'm giving it back. She shook her head. No, I can't. You already paid me, I interrupted. Every time you showed up at 5:30 a.m., every shift you stayed late, every moment you kept your head down and did the work without begging for applause. She looked like she might cry. I want you to use it, I said, for something that belongs only to you. A week later, she told me her idea. She wanted to open a small mobile cart, tea and hand pies, sold near the train station. She'd already made a sketch, picked out a name, Kettle and Crust. She asked if I thought she could handle it. I laughed. If anyone knows what starting from scratch feels like, I said, it's you. That weekend, I helped her paint the cart. It was yellow. Bright, stubborn, hopeful yellow. The kind of color that refuses to apologize for taking up space. She launched 3 weeks later. And I'll never forget watching her first customer, a woman in a red coat, lean over, take a sip of Earl Grey and smile wide. Best tea I've had in years, she said. Kendra didn't look at me when she heard that. She just closed her eyes for half a second and smiled to herself. Like someone who'd been underwater for a long time. And had finally come up for air. I still run the cafe. She still stops by every Saturday to drop off hand pies and sit for a bit. We don't talk about the past much anymore. Not because we're ignoring it, but because we're building something better. And that takes up all the room. One day, she left a new note by the register, taped next to the one from months ago. It said, Day 320. This life fits better than the lie ever did. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed her.